Yes, indeed. Welcome to the Bladtcast and welcome to our Kingdom of the Planet of the Bladts, Kingdom of the Podcast of the Apes. So many different titles that could work here. As always, I am Christian Blatt. And if we're talking apes, we will bring our simian expert to the fold, our resident Dr. Zayas, the one, the only Mark Hunt, our friend from Podcast of the Apes. Mark, welcome back to the Bladtcast.
Thank you.
Apes. And obviously, as we had said, you are qualified as a certified apes expert because of the simple fact that you have Podcast of the Apes. So please let everybody know where they can find that show, and it's many episodes dating back years. I assume including one that had as a guest our friend Dennis Miller.
Yeah, we are hosted by Podbean, but we're pretty much everywhere. If you just Google Podcast of the Apes, we pop right up. We're back. We had a long absence, and some of our episodes got dumped, so we're kind of slowly getting ready to build the back catalog. But we've got new content out now with the new movie coming out. So really, we're kind of everywhere. Getting there. There's a few other places we need to get back onto, but most of the podcast apps.
And so somebody who's a diehard Apes fan, they'll want to go through your show because it has all the original films, the original TV series. I believe you dove into some comic books, and then even the cheap offshoot that I saw in Mystery Science Theater 3000, Time of the Apes.
Yeah. Oh, there you are. You're back.
I'm not sure what the last thing was you heard me say, but I think
Time of the Apes.
Yeah. So you did a special on Time of the Apes, which is one I would have loved to have been a part of because of how much I enjoyed that on Science Theater 3000. And in the chat, Sam Whitfield, the great Sam Whitfield. Hello, gentlemen. It is an honor to have here. Flat Cat Jessica, is this my first Bladtcast? I think that this is indeed our first Bladtcast for you. And you know what, Flat Cat, you reminded me that I did not clip out my appearance on the BYB podcast last night, where, Mark, I promoted this and I talked a little bit about the joke that has been going on for many years now, that when I say your name, I always have a long pause between Mark and Hunt, because in the chat, this guy, Quadfather, this guy, Derek, he had someone whose screen name was Mike Rackhabit. And I was apparently the first person to ever notice. It's like, no, his name is supposed to be Mike Crack Habit. So that let us down. And you know what, Flat Jessica, as we say, I'm going to fix it in post. The audio version of this episode is going to start with that explanation from Quadfather. Sam Whitfield says, long time no see for both of you gentlemen. I'm glad that Craig Robinson is visiting with us from across the pond. I feel like Craig Robinson is probably more here for the Doctor Who talk, but I hope he has also seen Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. And this is pretty funny, though. He says, the only Planet of the Apes content I'm familiar with is the Simpsons parody episode. Yes, of course, Planet of the Apes, the musical, with which I feel like you should have done an episode on that, Mark, right?
We've referenced it a few times.
Oh, okay. The like Dr. Zayas, and I hate every ape I see, from Chimpan A to Chimpanzee. Yeah. And Sam actually watched the Rumble version. Sam, you wander around in some rough neighborhoods. You know Rumble better than I do. Everyone I talk to about Rumble says there are some great things about it, but it's mostly a pain in the ass. So here I am on YouTube trying to keep my content less than NC-17 so I don't have to worry about getting struck or flagged or any of that stuff. Anyway, Mark, that was a lot of preamble. But I'm glad that you're still up to the Apes. Now, have you done your Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes episode of Podcast of the Apes yet?
Oh yeah, we went saw it. I saw it Wednesday night at with a friend and my wife at a preview showing, and then me and the co-hosts of the show went Friday night to see it. It got over about 10 o'clock. We went straight to the studio and recorded well past midnight. So I have vague memories of recording it. It was a little we were a little frazzled by the end of it, but it's out there in all its flaws.
There was a Bladtcast moment in time where what we would do is we would go and see a movie at the Sherman Oaks Galleria, and then we were using a studio that Jeff, Captain EO, was working that was like pretty much across the street from it. So we would go to that studio right afterwards. Obviously, it's a little easier now that everything's virtual and all that, but it was fun. Unfortunately, the one movie we did that with was X-Men Apocalypse, which we've been talking about lately as just a terrible, terrible movie, Mark. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. So let's talk a little bit about Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. And I think the great place to start is this is the first Apes movie since, let's remind our audience of what the last one was. I think it's the one with a lot of snow. Is that the last one, or was that 2 Apes movies ago?
Nope, that was the last one with snow and Woody Harrelson.
Yeah.
War for the Planet of the Apes.
War for the Planet of the Apes. And it felt like that was the end of the saga when they did it. And maybe they had marketed it that way. Or am I wrong about that they didn't actually market it that way?
No, I don't know. They didn't market it that way. In fact, throughout that trilogy, they kind of left story breadcrumbs for future movies. Right. But it was definitely the beginning, middle, and end of that chapter, that little trilogy. And Kingdom is now going to, while it's a continuation, is now the beginning of a new trilogy.
Right. Okay. Yeah. This clearly, because they even tell us that this one is many years after that. We lay Caesar to rest in the beginning. The great Andy Serkis ape that we had really gotten to know and watch evolve and all of that. And we do get a new cast of characters. And yes, you've got a Caesar on the shelf. Is this a different room? Is this an Apes room, or is this the Apes corner of the same room that also has the Doctor Who corner?
This is the same room. I have a Doctor Who corner over there. I have a huge James Bond wall over here.
Right.
And this is Apes Central right here.
Yes, well, I'm glad that we are at Apes Central. I think that's an excellent place for us to be right now. So, and that movie was definitely pre-pandemic. It was about 5 years ago.
War for the Planet of the Apes, 17-ish, I think.
Whoa. Okay, so it's it's a whole child ago for me. My daughter Lucy was born at the end of 2017, so it's a whole Lucy ago. So I was close though. I was close when I said 5 years. So, but. Yeah, it's almost 7. So I think that's why I was surprised that this one was coming out. And maybe that's what made me feel like the last one was supposed to be kind of the final entry in the series, because it had been a while. It had been a while since we'd gotten one. What are your sort of big picture thoughts as you see this one? You can start with the positive, start with the negative, whatever you see fit, Mark.
Well, on the whole, I really enjoyed the film. I really liked it. I've kind of been waiting for it. Actually, probably would have gotten this sooner, except right after War came out, which did very well. Disney bought 20th Century Fox along that, and that kind of put a hold on everything.
Right.
And then Disney was kind of, Star Wars and Marvel were kind of there. That kind of came to the front burner for them. And Planet of the Apes kind of just was off to the side. Always kind of in development. And so with that much time going along, and Disney has arguably struggled with some of their top shelf franchises, I was very apprehensive going into this movie. And for the most part, I would give this one a solid B. I really enjoyed it. And I have some quibbles I can get to in a little bit, but
sure.
On the whole, I really enjoyed it.
Well, I don't agree with this assessment, but my friend Jonathan London, who runs the Geekscape network that I do a number of shows for, well, he's one of the people who runs it. His reaction, I thought, was funny. He called it boredom of the Planet of the Apes, and I'm like, okay, I think that's a pretty clever play on words, and I wonder if someone has written that review. And I wasn't bored per se, but there were definitely times where I wasn't sure why they were telling this part of the story, and I think it certainly won me over by the end, because we see that, the humans, obviously this was sort of very calculated. They wanted to get to where this abandoned oil tanker, or I mean, I guess that's what we would call it, right? It was like a frigate. I'm not quite sure what, but this, and the fact that there were all the weapons in there. And, I thought that there's some great storytelling that comes through that. I do think that one of the things that War of the Planet of the Apes, and I think you and I talked about it on the show, it was so impressive how much time they spent with just apes on screen, and they weren't even talking at first. I think correct me if I'm wrong, in War for the Planet of the Apes, that's when they sort of learn how to speak, and they're signing at first, because there's not a lot of talking in the beginning. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, Mark.
No, by War, the third film,
they probably did talking. Caesar was trying to help other apes learn how to talk. Maybe that's what it was.
Yeah, most of them were still pretty much struggling and just communicating primarily with sign language. Steve Zahn's character, if you remember, Little Bad Ape, he was pretty chatty.
That's true. That's a good point. So, but anyway, it was, these, wonderfully rendered CGI creations of apes interacting with each other in, largely, imitation sets and locations and things. And it was really impressive. This one I thought was done really well, but there was something that it took me a little while to come around. They had to set up the idea of, the getting the eggs and the bonding ceremonies and all of that. And I think it was a little building it up. And then, when tragedy strikes, as so often does when you have a village of apes, I think that the story was much more compelling at that point. I don't think they spent too much time with the setup, but I wasn't necessarily all in at that point, if that makes sense, Mark.
Yeah, I mean, the night I saw it, it was me, my wife, and a friend of mine. My one friend is really new to the Planet of the Apes. He just watched it, and yeah, he told me afterwards. He's like, "Yeah, I really didn't care for it that much." He was kind of bored with it. The next night I saw it with my other two co-hosts, one being a friend my age, and the other one being my 27-year-old son. We came out of it. My son he probably gave it a C, maybe.
Okay.
He found his big complaint was there's and I know nothing of video games, but there's a video game called Horizon Zero Dawn, and he said the setup and the whole setting was very similar to that video game, and it kind of took him out of it at the beginning. So that was his big complaint. So I understand people who found it a little slow. I found it more like, okay, this is a new trilogy. There's really a new time period. So we're really doing a lot of world building right now and trying to establish kind of the rules of the world, I guess. So I don't know. I was kind of, I was never out of it. I kind of really enjoyed it. Now, once at the beginning, it kind of was a little Luke Skywalker.
Yeah,
my home farm got destroyed, and the Jedi Master has now taken me in, and the Obi-Wan character, and that was a little like, okay, that's why I probably gave it a B.
Well, but, that part is it's not only very Star Wars, it's also very Disney, sort of that aspect of it. Oh my God, look at it, this terrible thing happens, and somebody smarter than me is gonna get me on the path. I mean, that's probably why Disney bought Star Wars, Mark. They're like, it fits into our structure.
Yeah.
So once that happened, though, you were like, okay, but you were never really out of it. And I mean, I found just visually, I found it to be very striking. I mean, one of the reasons that our visual audience is seeing some of the posters that they did for the large screen format, that I think that it just the scenery, the locations that they use looked great. Wait, you had something there. Hold that up again, Mark.
This was the early access movie poster.
Oh yeah. I've seen that one. Yeah, so
I think it was just AMC theaters, maybe other theaters had
right.
it.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, you have those, and I mean, we take a look at all this stuff, and I think that they did a good job. And sort of the fact that so much time had gone by, so the fact that in the one image, which I believe is the IMAX poster, the city is just so overgrown with greenery. I thought that was. I thought it all looked really cool, and I think that the ape performers, I did believe they did a good job. It's just it's a big hit when you're doing that kind of mocap performance and you don't have the goat of mocap performance, Andy Serkis, anymore. Obviously they had to move on from the Caesar character, but it made you realize, like, oh yeah, he's not just good at it, he's like great at it. And I don't think any of the apes came off like, oh, okay, this looked too computery, anything like that. It's just, I felt like I was missing sort of that presence that he brought to it. Did you have any thoughts like that as you watched it, or did you feel that the apes featured were up to snuff for you?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's a reason why back in the classic series, throughout the franchise, Roddy McDowall played 3 different ape characters. I mean, he was the master back then, and I think Andy Serkis is now. But I don't know if you follow Andy Serkis kind of has a full plate right now. He's about to go into another Lord of the Rings movie. So I don't even know if he was even offered it.
Yeah, he might not have been. Yeah, and he's doing more on-screen stuff. I mean, there was
and behind-screen stuff.
Yeah, there was an Idris Elba Luther Netflix movie that he was the villain in, and I was glad to see him as just a person, not as a CGI, anything. And and he does a lot of directing. I mean, quite a bit. So I understand that he's too busy. It's just more that I'm like, oh, it's too bad that it's an element that I think I really appreciated about the other films. And let's talk a little bit about the directing. So the director, I believe, is new to the franchise. His name's Wes Ball. He did the Maze Runner films, and I didn't realize until I looked him up, oh, they did do 3 of those. That felt like one of those franchises that they started and they never finished. But I guess they did all 3 Maze Runner films. So, look, I think he's capable of you have that track record. You're able to do some very effective fantasy-based storytelling. So I think he was a good choice. And I think he does a fine job when you're telling stories that don't have as many actual people in them. I think that this movie is certainly well directed. I believe that story structure all worked for me. I think it was just a little slow at times, but really once it got going, I think it was really just in the beginning. I was like, oh, am I on board for like 2+ hours of this? And I was eventually, but maybe not right away, Mark.
Yeah, I think Wes Ball did a fairly good job. I like the direction. I liked most of the performances. Noah, the main character.
Yeah.
That is played by an actor, Owen Teague. I don't know if you're familiar with him from when CBS All Access first started. They did The Stand.
Yeah, the Stephen King miniseries, right? They did a Stand. I forgot about that. That was like, it was like they had Star Trek and The Stand. So yeah, he did that. I hadn't seen him in anything. I guess he was in a Black Mirror episode, but
I haven't. I'd always seen him in The Stand.
Yeah, but I don't believe I'd seen him. Obviously, we don't see him in this, but there's some good performance. I think he does a great job, and I think that the Noah character, I mean, we spend the whole movie with him, so he really has to work, doesn't he?
Yeah. Which I think he did a pretty good job. I think unfortunately, I know if you're fans of the Orville, the alien character on there, Bortus, played the orangutan, Raka.
Okay.
And I loved his character. The moment he sort of died, I was like, oh, they're breaking. There's no way he's dead. He's coming back.
Yeah, he's got to come back.
No way.
Right? Yeah.
And
that actor's name is Peter Jared Macon. So yes, he was Bortus on the Orville, and he was it Raka in this? Is that how they said his name?
Raka.
Or Raka? Raka. Okay, yeah.
And of course, Kevin Durand as Proximus Caesar, which I'm sure I'm sure there's a movie what you would know him as a Marvel fan.
Yeah, he was the Blob in X-Men Origins Wolverine.
Yep. The first thing that came to mind, the only thing I really know him from was the Blob.
And it's tough to figure out what is the worst X-Men movie. That one is very likely going to get all the votes. That's a first ballot Hall of Famer bad X-Men movie. But yes, he played the character the Blob, and he was this character Joshua in Dark Angel, which was the show that brought us Jessica Alba. So I kind of remembered that, but the voice. It was one of those like where the voice sounds familiar, but I didn't know who he was, so I had to look him up. I think that the voice acting and mocap performances are good. Now, who I didn't know was the female character, and remind me what the female character's name was in this.
Well, first they start calling her Nova, but her name's May.
That's it. Yeah, her name's May. It's
played by Freya Allen.
Freya Allen, yeah. So, and I never saw The Witcher, so I didn't know her.
My son's a fan of at least the first season, the Henry Cavill years he watched, but
oh, I see.
I think he dropped off after that.
I think
didn't stick around for the Hemsworth season.
Yeah, well, I mean, it seems like if you replace Superman with Thor, it should be fine, unless it was a different Hemsworth. Then
it was the lesser Hemsworth.
Oh, it was the one from Hunger Games. Yeah, nobody wants that. Yeah, nobody. And there's a third one. Imagine if they replaced him with the third Hemsworth brother. So yeah, I thought she was very good, especially because look, I don't think the reveal that May knew how to talk was really surprising. But I do think she did well with it, keeping that secret and keeping all of her secrets and sort of having for her a very uneasy alliance with the apes, but Noah being sort of very accepting and understanding and, being a little bit of a sucker. But I thought she was good. And the only other human that we see, except for, of course, the very end, is William H. Macy, who I think brought us some classic William H. Macy. It's as if his character from Shameless just ran out of all the booze and pills because it was the end of the world. So he just had to sort of go into a forced detox and try to hang on. And I felt like he had there was a fitting arc for the William H. Macy character. Don't you, Mark?
Yeah, well, when we get the big reveal at the end of what's going on with the humans, because that was for me, at least as an Apes fan, that was the big mystery, because as I watch the trailers, I see there's humans running around in savage clothes, but then we get this girl running around in fairly modern clothes.
Yeah,
and my first reaction was, oh, is she a time traveling astronaut? And because that would have been the Tim Burton version of the Apes universe. Actually, if you go back to Rise of the Planet of the Apes, the first one, there is a scene where they're all sitting at the dinner table and the TV in the background, they're talking about a Mars mission for this ship called the Icarus. And then near the end, as the apes are taking over San Francisco, there's a newspaper headline that says that mission has been lost. So every Apes fan is like, oh, they're planting the seed for a future movie, which still could happen. But that was my first thought, is she part of this space mission? But instead, we find out that humans have been locked in these vaults. They've isolated themselves from the virus that wiped out mankind, and they've been sending out scouts, one of them being May and one of them being William H. Macy. William H. Macy deciding, both of them probably left for dead. One of them decides to team up with the apes, as he did, and become like the house human, I guess you'd say.
That's exactly the term that I was going to use for him. Yes, he's Sam Jackson's character in Django Unchained. He's the house human. Absolutely, yes.
And then May, just kind of near death, kind of just teams up with Raka and Noah and kind of tries to complete her mission.
Yeah. And there is sort of a point where it is always Noah's story, but you realize that it sort of becomes dual storytelling, because it is very much May's story that we just don't know what it is that she's doing. That's
right.
Revealed to us much later. And I think that, it's tough if they try to make these with no humans in them. I know that's why probably why we always get some humans. I feel like this isn't of this sort of new wave of films. It felt like this was the least amount of human interaction, but you tell me if I'm wrong about that, Mark.
I would say War for the Planet of the Apes, really, you had Woody Harrelson and then the little girl.
Yeah.
Were really the only two humans.
Yeah, because Woody Harrelson had like goons who worked for him, but we didn't do much with them. Yeah.
Well, they're kind of important because if you go back to the second film of the original series, Beneath the Planet of the Apes, there were those weird mutants that lived underground, and they worshipped the nuke, the bomb.
Right. Yes.
And they had the Alpha and the Omega symbol on them, and Woody Harrelson's people carried the Alpha Omega symbol as their banner. And at the end of that movie, while he gets killed, pretty much his entire group gets buried under a mountain. So kind of leaving that story breadcrumb that it maybe these guys are going to eventually come back and be this new version of these underground mutants that worship the Alpha and the Omega symbol. So yet another little story thread that they planted for future movies.
Right. I mean, this seems like it's a standalone, trilogy. Obviously, it's sort of a continuation, but that is certainly a thread that they could continue pulling on.
I don't know if you've heard, Wes Ball came out and said that the producers' original, their intent is they want to do 9 films. We have the original 3. We're starting a new trilogy, and they want to do a third trilogy, 7, 8, and 9, which may take place way in the future. But
yeah, well, I mean, obviously that's what Disney wants to do. They like to make third trilogies in film series. That's it's obviously when you keep making them. And look, I certainly the way this ends, and sort of, we'll talk kind of about a couple of the main action sequences in this film, but the way it ends, it definitely has me like, okay, I kind of want to see the rest. I want to see where we go after this. I'm interested in following these characters' stories. And I assume you felt the same way.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I thought they kind of wrapped up the Noah story. That was the one storyline I was like, oh, they kind of wrapped that up, and it wasn't really until the end where May goes off and we find out, wait a minute, there's networks of humans living in vaults underground who apparently we find out went underground before the virus even spread. So they've been down there for generations, completely cut off. So much so that whenever they send the scouts out, like May, when she comes back, she's not even allowed to go back in. They have to come out to her to get the information in a hazmat suit, go back in and get completely scrubbed down, because they probably have no idea what this virus is even going to do to them.
Yeah, I think that it's definitely very intriguing. You sort of see that sort of decontamination process that obviously it's like, she's been out there, she's been amongst the apes. And even this many generations later, there's still obviously going to be all those concerns. And I'm going to assume they've learned the hard way how those things, need to be compensated for, I suppose. And I agree with you. I do think that we're done with Noah's story. He kind of gets his happy ending. They rebuild his village. And in talking about rebuilding the village, I wanted to get your thoughts sort of on 2 big set pieces. So the first is when they refer to them as the mask apes, right? They're like the violent ones because they're wearing the hoods. So when they come and basically destroy Noah's village, I thought that that was incredibly well done. Just sort of the devastation of, well, it doesn't take much for a treehouse village to get knocked over. I'm glad that these guys never sought out the Ewoks, because I don't think that the Ewoks and the Ewok village would have been equipped. How did you think that sequence played out as you were watching? It's fairly early in the film. It's really only like 15-20 minutes in, and like I said, that's when it started to really ramp up for me, is unfortunately the devastation of Noah's village.
Yeah, I actually really like that sequence. The whole village itself I thought was an interesting set piece. It took me a minute to watch, and I, as they're walking through, I realized these tree houses are actually built in power line towers, because they have a metal framework and there's still some cables. So when they come with their electrical sticks, they actually use the frame to kind of shock people. So it's kind of interesting how they've kind of built through those electrical towers, tree houses to build their aviaries. And I don't know if it was an intentional nod, but when they're raiding the village at night, the lead gorilla has this helmet on. That it's not a mask, it's kind of a helmet. Looks very, very similar to Michael Duncan Clark's helmet in the Tim Burton film. I don't know if that was intentional, but every person I've talked to said, was that like a reference to the Tim Burton film? Because, man, he looked just like his character.
That's interesting. I certainly didn't catch that. I can't say that I have particularly fond feelings for the Tim Burton film. It's not like it was great all the way along, but when it ends with the infamous Ape Lincoln ending, it was just like, oh no, Tim Burton, you're so much better than this, But where does that one rank for you? Tim Burton
I'm not. I was saying I was not a fan of that. Did not care for it. He actually wrote 2 tie-in novels that were really good because he left. If you remember, he left the space station. The space station supposedly crashed on the planet, and he comes back thousands of years later through a time warp, and the apes have evolved. There's actually 2 books about what happened to the space station when they crashed and how they survived that are way more interesting than the movie was. And Dark Horse even did a series of comic books that were kind of mini sequels. Those were way more interesting than the Tim Burton movie. So, I thought that, I was like, good Lord, how can you do such a thing, Tim Burton? And then, of course, he went on and took my beloved franchise of Dark Shadows and really said, hold my beer. Let me show you what I can do with your beloved franchise.
Oh, Mark, you don't like when I ruin your childhood? All right. Yeah, just imagine if Tim Burton did a Doctor Who. A standalone. I asked our chat if anybody had seen the movie and if anyone is getting interested in hearing us talk about it. And Craig from across the pond says he hasn't seen it. It does sound like an interesting watch, especially if I don't have to do homework with all the others. Yeah, I think you could come in and see this one. I think the previous trilogy I thought was great, and it's certainly worth a watch. But you don't have to see it if you want to see this right now on a big cinematic screen and check it all out. I think you need to know a little bit about the backstory, but not really. You're just like, okay, this is a planet it's our planet. It's run by the apes because of a virus that wiped out most of humanity.
Right, and then. There's little bits like, the legacy of Caesar. You're not going to know what Caesar was really like because that's part of it is people have different takes on what Caesar was like. You're not going to know what this little thing is that Rocca wears on his around his neck, the Order of Caesar. You're not going to know the significance of that. Little touches that, that you wouldn't pick up on. But for the most part, it's pretty much a standalone. It's the first of a whole new story.
Right, which I think is definitely, it's smart to not have it so tied down to the lore.
Now, I would recommend you go back and watch the Rise, Dawn, and War, but
I would say definitely watch those 3. And if you're really enjoying them, with the classic films, I think that the first one stands so far above and beyond. I'm not disparaging the others, but I just think that first one is a great film. If they had never told any more ape stories, you were like, yeah, it works perfectly, but you have to really want to dig deep. And Craig Robinson, I know you're here because we're going to talk about Doctor Who a little later. You understand there might be some of those serials, some of those storylines from the late 70s and early 80s that you're like, okay, what's on the page is good, not necessarily what's on the screen. It happens sometimes. So if you really dig deep into the Apes, but I don't know anything about the TV series. Was it any good, or was it you just covered it as a completist, Mark?
I adored the TV series.
Okay.
That was really my first foray into Planet of the Apes. They had the TV series came out, and what they did was they showed it. There was 16 episodes, and what they would do for syndication is they took 10 of them and made 2-hour movies, made 5 2-hour movies. And our local UHF station used to run these as standalone movies. And the show was Mark Leonard, who you probably know as Sarek of Vulcan.
Of course, the great Mark Leonard. Yeah,
Mark Leonard.
Yes, Spock's father.
Was, the main. Yeah, he was the main villain, kind of. He was General Security Chief Urko, the gorilla. He would chase around Roddy McDowall's character Galen and 2 humans that had time traveled to the front. In fact, Roddy McDowall's character Galen is probably my favorite character of the entire franchise. Roddy McDowall has even said Galen was his favorite character to play in that TV series. You get a young, one episode had Sandra Locke in it. You get a young Jackie Earl Haley in an episode.
Like pre-Bad News Bears, Jackie Earl Haley?
He was pre-Bad News Bears. Yeah, this would have
but
been
it's like that era. Okay, yeah. It's funny. All the time that I've known you and I've known that you've been doing this podcast of the Apes, I've never thought to actually ask you. That's why I asked you right now about the TV series. Was there ever an animated series, or am I remembering something? Misremembering?
No, you remember
something?
correctly. They did an animated series called Return to the Planet of the Apes. It was very different. It was kind of more like the original Pierre Boulle novel, where the apes had a very advanced society. They had TV stations, radio stations, drove around in cars. The main in that one, they had the main General Urko, and that was the gorilla, actually voiced by the guy who did Fred Flintstone. So it sounds weird having Fred Flintstone's voice coming out of a gorilla, but it was by the guys who I think would eventually go on to do like Johnny Quest. I think.
Oh, okay.
Ruby Spears, I think. Was
they also did Alvin and the Chipmunks, and Care Bears was Nelvana who did Ewoks. But yeah, Ruby Spears did. I mean, they obviously did a lot of successful animated products. The big one being, I think, Alvin and the Chipmunks. So yeah, well, that's interesting because I kind of remember that from as a kid, but I don't really remember anything about it, the animated series. But on your recommendation, I will check out the TV series at some point. Yeah, and of course, you have that as well. Yeah,
you can kind of see the animation on there, and it's
hold it up again for our visual audience. Yeah, just put it right back. It's funny because they look like Fred and Velma from Scooby-Doo. There's that couple right there.
Yep.
All right. Well, let's bring it back to the present and talk about this film. And I thought the sequence for, their whole heist / escape, I thought was incredibly well thought out, from a writing standpoint, but a production standpoint, just what was going to be on this boat. And, it might be a little bit on the nose that they happened to find children's books where they saw apes in a zoo. But I was also like, it's not that far-fetched that kids would have a book like that. Like, here, look, we're at the zoo. I have a book like that for my kids for when they were littler, and it was all the animals in the zoo, and some of them were apes. So, it's not that that preposterous,
There's actually, from the TV series we were just talking about, there was an episode where they find a children's book with the gorilla in the cage. So a lot of people think that might be a nod to the TV series.
Yeah, sure.
There's a scene where they pick up the little doll and it says "Mama, Mama." That's actually, it sounds exactly like the doll from Charlton Heston movie that they pick up and start saying "Mama." So I think they kind of dropped that a little bit. So there were little Easter eggs to previous Apes incarnations throughout that little vault they were going through.
Yeah, no, I mean the proverbial vault, as it's an actual vault, and just sort of the layout of this ship, and May knowing exactly what she should be looking for, and the apes basically running interference, and one of my favorite moments in the whole movie is so the Ape King he's Proto Caesar? Is that what his actual character name is? Is that what you called him? Proximus. Yeah, I knew I had it wrong. Yeah. So Proximus Caesar. And yes, I know it's a CGI ape, but the look on his face when he saw her use the gun and what the gun could do, that is some of the best acting that I've seen in a long time. And yes, again, it's a CGI ape. Just that look on his face of like, oh my God, you just shot my buddy, but I don't care because I want that. I want to be able to do that. And, just sort of it really gives us the sense for why she needed to destroy all that, why the apes couldn't get what was in there. And I thought that the sort of brutal uprising of the birds against Proximus was very fitting. I haven't seen anything like that since Birdemic. Mark, it was practically a birdemic. I was actually going to say the birds, and then I remembered Birdemic. I thought that like we said earlier, it gave a very satisfying ending to Noah and his story. But that sequence, I think, obviously the film kind of builds up to it, and it didn't let me down. I think that just with the water and the fights and trying to not drown and fighting underwater and all that, I thought that stuff was cool. What did you think?
I thought it was very cool. Although I thought it was maybe a little too on the nose to have a main character named Noah and have the bad guys at the end being wiped out by a great flood. I was like, okay,
that's not a bad. That's not a bad note. Maybe somebody at the studio could have said something at some point. You're not wrong, Mark.
It was a bit on the nose, but I let these things slide every now and then.
Yeah. So I thought it was good, and I think that in general, like Craig said, he was a little bit intrigued. I would still say the earlier trilogy is stronger than this, but it's not that this isn't good. It just you could start here, but I would just say watch the other ones. Unless you get triggered by seeing James Franco in a movie in 2024. There's nothing we can really do about that. If you don't like seeing James Franco in a movie, it does have John Lithgow, a.k.a. National Treasure John Lithgow. So whom
I've met and is a very nice man.
I think that a whole generation knows him primarily from Third Rock from the Sun, where he was amazing. So,
he was signing a book in early 2000s, and I went to meet him. And my co-host / son was about 4 at the time.
Oh, cool.
And crawled underneath his chair and wouldn't come out. So he was luckily he thought it was funny and cute and was very nice about it. But to this day, every time we watch that movie, I have to remind Brody. I was like, yeah, that's the guy who you crawled under his chair and wouldn't come out till I dragged you out,
and would not come out. Yeah. Oh, that's funny. Any thoughts of anything you wanted to shine a light on? Maybe any, you referenced some Easter eggs. Are there any sort of deep dive sort of things that are worth talking about from this film?
Oh man, it's one of those ones they didn't do, unlike Dawn and War. Those they did prequel comics leading up to it and prequel novels and really expanded on it. I'm hoping now that Marvel has the rights to this, I'm hoping they do some expanded storytelling in this time period. I can't think they wouldn't.
No, and I feel like they're doing an adaptation or a tie-in. There is something that's out now, isn't there?
Yeah, Marvel's got, actually, here's the Marvel issue Planet of the Apes comic book box they did. A little promotional item there.
Very cool.
And they did one mini series that ties into Rise Through War in that time period, and then he did a second mini series that actually ties in with the original movie series. So they kind of have the rights to everything, and it seems like they're going to kind of do little anthology stories throughout the Planet of the Apes franchise. So I'm hoping they keep it up. I haven't heard what the next thing is, but I know it's #1 movie right now. It's making a lot of money, so I can't think that they're not gonna maybe try and milk it a little bit.
Yeah, and it came out at the perfect point in the summer, and it's also coming out in what is a kind of a very underwhelming summer. And maybe it's because there's only one Marvel movie for me, but you know, I mean, there's movies that look good, but there's not a lot of excitement. You know, watching the trailers before this, I mean, I'm excited to take my kids to see the Garfield movie, and I grew up, I loved that character, so I'm excited for that. But it's not like other years, you know. I mean, even last year we had a Guardians of the Galaxy movie for me to be really excited about, you know.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was as soon as 2024 hit, it was Godzilla, Kong, and Planet of the Apes. Those have come and gone, and I was like, well, is there really? I mean, I probably will check out the Mad Max prequel, Furiosa. Deadpool, Wolverine, I'll probably see, and
really Furiosa is one of those ones that, because I have the AMC movie theater membership where, you know, I can see up to 3 movies a week. That's why I'll definitely see it, because it's like, all right, and you know, that thing basically pays for itself if you see 2 movies in a month. Really, it's like a movie and a half. So, and they're not a sponsor, but I would love for them to be. So, I would check that out. This is, you know, I know our buddy Dominicus Saxon, he must be working right now, but I know that he also has the AMC A-list, and he's always looking for movies to see on it. I would say this is a good one for our buddy Dominicus Saxon. If there's nothing else, I think that as we just shift sort of drastically, and we move to elsewhere in time and space, and we will talk a little bit about so they're not the first 2 episodes, but it's essentially the official episodes of the new season of Doctor Who. And, you know, I know in England they say the new series. This really is being billed as a new series. This is being referred to as season 1, which must drive you crazy, because even the Christopher Eccleston reboot season 1 was also not season 1, right?
Right.
So what season is this really? Is it like season 50, or what season should it be?
Something?
Okay, 30 something. Yeah. But it was like we did 13 seasons of the reboot, right? And then, or it was more than that, now that I think about it. But anyway, and then all of a sudden we get to like, all right, now it's season 1 because we're on Disney Plus. And, you know, you were part of a panel that we did when the specials came out, which included the Christmas special. We talked about the David Tennant specials. And I think for the most part, we were content with what we got. And what did we decide is how, well, for the most part, what did we decide was how we said his name, the new Doctor? Shooty, yeah, because I was going to say, Shooty Gatwa. Yeah, it's weird. The Gatwa is easier to say. So, and I think that they clearly went very bold with their selection. And I'm not saying because it's a Black Doctor Who. It's just more sort of the persona that he carries. You know, it's a very. It's I mean, the term we used to use was metrosexual. You know, he's very comfortable in his skin, which he's only been in this skin for a little while. And that's a choice that they've made, you know, and I think that it's not as much a problem there. And as companions go, I feel as though Millie Gibson as Ruby Sunday is she's filling a role that's very familiar for even those of us that mostly have, you know, seen the reboots, but even, you know, sort of that classic, oh, there's something about her. I didn't meet her by chance. There's something mystical about her. She's not just this girl, you know, and I think with Clara, they went a little too far with putting the importance on her. But I mean, you know, Amy was also important, you know, to the mythos. But that's a lot of preamble. I want to know, you as an expert on all things apes, and also on Doctor Who. How did you feel about the 2 episodes? I think the first one's called Maestro, and the second one's got the Beatles in it. No, that's the first. That's the same episode.
Yeah.
Sorry, the first one is Space. First one, Space Babies.
Space
Yeah,
Babies.
yeah. So your thoughts on these 2 episodes that we've gotten so far in this season?
Well, Space Babies. There was a British show some people might be familiar with called Red Dwarf.
Yeah, which was like a comedy sci-fi series, right? Yeah.
It felt like I was watching Red Dwarf.
Interesting.
Like the crew would come. There's babies riding around, and poison gas from their dirty nappies and snot monsters. It seemed, for me at least, it seemed very Red Dwarvish.
Mm-hmm.
It was okay. The second one, Devil's Cord, was a bit over the top at times. Not so. I'm Maestro. It seemed more like an Adam West Batman villain than Doctor Who villain, although supposedly is an offspring of the toy maker, so that's an interesting choice.
I thought that was an interesting choice because they're sort of dealing with this mythology where the background of it is really, this idea that it's, I don't know exactly how to describe it. So it's like, so he's the doctor and the master's the master and this is the maestro. It's sort of, sort of following that, I guess. But yeah, the offspring of the toy maker, if the toy maker is going to be the Neil Patrick Harris toy maker, which, chewed up some scenery, was a little bit over the top, to put it mildly. This is fitting. And I thought that, my thought on Maestro is that it's an interesting idea for a villain. But it's also sort of like when we got Missy, the female master, it was like this, but dialed down and not as broad and not as over the top. And I found that to be a much more palatable character, Missy. And yes, they're both females, but I think that as female adversaries, it's rational to compare them. What did you think about? Did you have any echoes of Missy when we saw Maestro, Mark?
No, I was more thinking of Divine from the John Waters films. But
oh yeah, for Pink Flamingos and all of that. Yeah. But by the way, just our buddy Craig Robinson, who again is across the pond. Red Dwarf had a monster made of curry. Cut of the jib. Great to see you, sir. Keep up the great work. You always have great guests, brother, even though I don't usually get to catch it live. So you hear that, Mark? You're a great guest, according to Cut of the Jib.
I like the cut of his jib.
Yeah, we all like the cut of his jib. Yeah, exactly. So, but what?
And I'm also, I'm not a big musical guy, so musicals aren't a big thing for me. So I'm wait and see. The next episode looks like it may be a little more down to earth, so to speak. So
well, and apparently it's been revealed that episode's written by Stephen Moffat. So okay. it seems like, yeah, there's like a landmine that he steps on early, and the episode is then like, what do you do next? And I think Moffat's best episodes, sadly, his best episodes were the ones when he wasn't the showrunner, and they all kind of had a lot of like, oh, this is you know what? It had a Kobayashi Maru element to it. Where it's like, oh, I'm in this no-win scenario, but how do I come up with it? What did you think about in the Devil's Cord, that episode, the idea that we got to see the Doctor be so scared and terrified of this adversary? It's, again, he's only been the Doctor for kind of a little while, but they even say that it's like, I don't know, they actually give a month. It's like the summer by now. So he's at least been the Doctor for like 6 months. It was right before Christmas. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's not like this is, his regeneration episode. I was surprised that he was like, we have to hide. I don't know what to do about this. Did that ring false for you at all?
Well, I was very unclear. I couldn't tell if there was something that the Maestro was doing that was causing the fear. I was kind of waiting for an explanation for that, and then I don't know. If there was one, I didn't get it. I didn't think he was being afraid for the sake of being afraid, but I don't. Maybe he was. I don't know.
No. I think just from a storytelling standpoint, I was surprised that they made that choice, that he was going to be that scared, and I guess it's to, I don't know. I guess amp up the tension and the fear of this adversary. But yeah, I thought that it just, I don't know. It seemed, I guess, because this doctor in particular is so laid back. He's got a jukebox, and he's, and then to see like, oh no, he's actually terrified. I guess that's interesting, and I guess we have to factor in that he's that much older than even the Jodie Whittaker doctor. I mean,
well, the
so
snot monster seemed way more scary, and he didn't seem
yeah.
afraid of that at all. So
No,
yeah, I didn't know why.
He was able to reason that out. Yeah.
There was some
Sorry,
reason why I was afraid. But I mean, there were some nice little callbacks. He references the fact that as soon as I heard he was landing in 1963, I'm thinking, okay, are they going to reference the fact that he's supposedly parked in a junkyard with his granddaughter in 1963?
When I messaged you, you hadn't seen it yet. And I said, oh, there's some references that I think you're going to like. Specifically, it was that. And I like that he shows... I almost called her Millie. He tells Ruby, it's like, he points. It's like, yeah, I'm right over there right now with my granddaughter. And I like when they address that, because everyone always has the same reaction. I think Capaldi referenced it to Bill at one point, and it was like, your granddaughter? And he's like, yeah. It's like, whatever. But at least that guy looked like he could have a granddaughter, so it's
right.
It's less weird in that way. But yeah, so I don't know. Well, I had the issue that I felt like the Beatles that they cast could not have looked less like the Beatles. And I tried to get past it, but I couldn't, Mark. Our buddy Gene Beretta is such a huge Beatles file. It's almost like I should ask him, like, just watch these scenes. Tell me what you think about it. And the great comic book writer J.M. DeMatteis, he posted that as he was watching that, he had so much trouble dealing with the fact that there were so many things about the Beatles that were inconsistent. Like, John didn't wear those glasses at that time, that sort of a thing. And it's like, well, this is a world that's been changed, so it's all right. Now, Craig Robinson has a theory. I think it was the doctor hearing the same sound from the giggle and the link to the toy maker that got him so scared. I think that's some good insight. And I definitely appreciated. I appreciate that Craig always seems to be thinking more about it. But yeah, I mean, it didn't annoy me, but I'm like, I mean, there's a lot of archival recordings, not just music. Like, we know what the Beatles sounded like. I think we could have done a little bit better. I mean, Paul didn't look anything like Paul, is what I'm trying to say.
Well, the Beatles have actually been on Doctor Who. There's a first Doctor episode, and I think when they released it to DVD for rights issues, they had to cut it. But he's landing on Earth with his I think his granddaughter's gone by then. He's got it looks like a TV set. And he's kind of scanning through radio waves, and the Beatles pop up. And they actually are singing. I don't even remember what song they're playing, but they actually have the Beatles playing live on a TV, and he kind of flips past it. And then I think when that came out on video, I think they had to cut it for rights issues. But which
that doesn't sound like something that they did a clearance in perpetuity throughout the universe, considering that this is the time period where they used to just record over the masters of shows. So they probably had well, it's going to air this week, so we'll clear the video for that 1 week. So
the one thing that did kind of annoy me was, I don't know why all of a sudden now the doctor is explaining his name by saying everyone from his planet has their names are titles, the this and the that, in which in the history of Doctor Who, every time he went back to Gallifrey, everybody's got normal names. So I'm not quite sure when that became a thing. And you'd think there's only so many titles a race could have. So how he lucked out and got something normal like the Doctor, as opposed to, so you eventually get, it's like trying to come up with you're on on a website trying to come up with a username, and you have to, that's been taken. That's been
taken.
That's
already been
eventually,
taken. Eventually,
you're the shoehorn, or you're the toilet seat or something, because just every noun out there is kind of taken. But I don't know. That's me, a classic nitpick for me. But
no, but it's a valid nitpick. I found that episode to be better, and I like sort of dealing with these ideas that, there is more to Ruby Sunday, and I like sort of, okay, there's something, the maestro had to just deal with the fact that, like, oh wait, there's more to this girl than it seems, which is always intriguing. And I just hope that the eventual payoff, maybe in a season or two, is going to be worth it when we know what it is. I did like the idea that she basically had Christmas in her heart. I'm a sucker for stuff like that, Mark, as I would celebrate Christmas much more throughout the year if it was socially acceptable. But unfortunately, it's not. So I was kind of intrigued by that. Mm-hmm. And man, they keep finding excuses for her to sing on this show, don't they, Mark?
They kind of get an excuse for everybody to sing on that show.
Yeah. I mean, this is the third story with her and Shooty, and there's always some singing in it. I do like. Oh, sorry, go ahead. Finish.
I was gonna say there was one little Easter egg I thought was kind of a nice little shout out there. He talks about after he regenerated, but before he met her, we kind of get a flashback that he saw her playing the piano in a pub.
Yeah.
And he says, yeah, I saw you playing at the King's Arms. And for Matt Smith fans to go back to, there's an episode where the Doctor plays, where Matt Smith plays on a pub football team playing a little footy. And across the chest, it's the King's Arm pub that is the team he's playing for. I thought that was kind of a nice little Easter egg for the Matt Smith
Is that
fans.
One of the episodes with James Corden?
That was the episode.
Yeah. Which, America seems to have turned on him in the last couple of years, but he did attend a Doctor Who happy hour that young Agent Starling and I went to, and he did buy a round of drinks for everyone. So I have nothing bad to say. Because they were showing his episodes, and the organizer tweeted at him, and he showed up. Now I have nothing bad to say about James Corden because he bought me a beer. But I was less, again, what I was going to say about that episode before we move off the Devil's Cord, that there is something that's kind of like, oh, okay, it's sort of a sentimental thing that basically the Beatles saved the universe. John and Paul really saved all of us, because yes, the Doctor had done most of it and the notes were kind of hanging there in the air, and they're like, oh yeah, you have that note in the back of your head that they had set up. So that's the kind of thing that with time travel might bother me. Like in the early episodes of Quantum Leap, when Sam taught Michael Jackson how to moonwalk, and they would do really gimmicky stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But this, I was like, that's all right. But I have really the Space Babies. I think the best way to describe it is that that one was pretty stupid. It just felt like a dumb episode. And what I didn't like about the Space Babies is the fact that they just reminded me of the E-Trade babies in the commercials. I mean, that's really what they seemed like to me, and our visual audience is seeing some of these talking babies. And I think that the technology has come a bit of a ways since then, but that's the one thing that I'll say about the Space Babies. It looked good when they talked, and that's maybe some Disney money thrown in there. Do you think, Mark?
Yeah, probably, I guess. It was kind of there for me, I guess. I don't know. I was kind of already just rolling my eyes during that whole episode anyway. But they did better making apes talk, I thought, but the babies were harmless enough, I guess.
Yeah, but it wasn't a great story, and it felt sort of similar to stories we had before. There's little things that I think worked okay. It was like when one baby got a hug, then everybody wanted a hug. There were things that I think touch upon sort of child rearing, and but yeah, for the most part, I guess it was good that there were 2 episodes. I didn't love either of them. The Beatles one was a little bit better, and I think that the Stephen Moffat episode that we're going to get next week is probably going to be a fairly good one. At least it is. But in general, their interaction together, I'm fine with Shooty and Millie Gibson. I think that they're like BFFs like right away, and I guess it's a different Doctor, it's it's a far cry from the sort of the classic series where even not just Hartnell, but even Tom Baker was always sort of like a headmaster and trying to keep them all in mind. Yeah. No,
definitely not huggers.
Never huggers. Yeah. It would almost be like, Doctor, can I give you a hug? He would have been like, get off my ship and never return. Craig Robinson, like the censoring of the nanny filter when she would curse. Yeah. There's little things that were funny. They were like baby things that were funny, but it's, I think the comparison to Red Dwarf was a good one. I did not see that much of the Orville, but the early episodes that I saw, some of them I'm like, these are better than anything Star Trek was doing at the time. There were some really good episodes of that show. Speaking of Star Trek, I will confess to you right now that I have seen no episodes of the current season of Discovery. It's just from a lack of time. I do too many shows like this, and it's the final season, and there are a lot of characters on the show I like. There's a few I don't, but I want to see their voyage through to the end, Mark. And you haven't seen any of it either. Is that what I'm to understand?
Yep. Yeah, I am counting down to Strange New World, though. Whenever, I don't know, do we even have a date for that yet? Strange New World?
No, because they weren't able to go into production on season 2 until after the strike ended, which was last fall. So I would imagine sometime next year we'll probably get it. So, and I don't think there's anything to tide us over in between. So,
Lower Decks, I think, is ending, and if it hasn't already ended,
no, I think it has like a season that they finished, and then that's going to be it. That's my understanding on Lower Decks. So, well, we'll have more to talk about in the near future, and I fell so far behind. Now I'm just waiting, I think, for the season to end. I'll catch up. It'll be a summertime binge for me.
Yeah,
and these Doctor Who episodes coming out once a week. For those of us on the West Coast, it's, I think, Fridays at 4 p.m. because it ends up on the BBC iPlayer at midnight. So I think that they end up on BBC iPlayer before the actual BBC airs them. So I don't know how any of this works. It's a streaming world, Mark. That's what we need to know. In any case, it's always a delight to get the chance to talk to you. Please let people know where they can find Podcast of the Apes. And if they want to try and tweet at you, it's Mark Coyne, COYNE 70. Do I have that right?
Let's see. No, Mark Coyne Hunt, HUNT on Twitter. That's my email address is Mark Coyne Hunt at markcoyne70 at gmail.com.
Okay. And you don't mind giving that out? You're okay giving that out?
I rarely use it. But I mean, for the podcast, the big one is going to be mostly on Facebook. That one is where most of our subscribers go. That's, I mean, really, honestly, when the movie was coming back, we were kind of on the fence of even if we even wanted to come back and do the podcast, and Facebook just kind of blew up. Everyone kind of went there, and I didn't realize our Facebook numbers doubled after we stopped doing it. So it was like, okay, that seems to be where everybody's finding us. So that's been a big one. And that one again,
I'll talk to you. I'll talk to you off air. But like right now, I'm doing this for YouTube and Facebook and Twitter. And when you can do them live and get the live interaction, which might be a little bit tricky for your setup, it's worth it though, because this was like an afternoon on a Thursday, and we still had some great people in the chat. A few people I had to kick out of the chat, but it's fine. But in any case, it's always wonderful to get a chance to chat with you. Our visual audience has seen that I've been trying out a crawl there. And our next episode, Bladtcast 596, I'll be joined by Little Lemmy, and we'll be talking about an infamous film starring Malcolm McDowell, which Malcolm McDowell sure knew how to pick his infamous films, from Clockwork Orange to Star Trek Generations, which is a very controversial film in my household. But we're going to talk about the full extended version of Caligula. I've never seen it, Mark, but I was trading messages with Lemmy, who I've been on some shows with her before on the Husey Entertainment Network. And we were coming up with what would be a good film for us to do. And I was like, I'm fascinated by this movie, because my understanding is that you have these classically trained, like Shakespearean actors who are in this movie, and then they would go home at night and then they would shoot scenes that are hardcore pornography for the same movie. So I definitely want to see how they do all that, and how it fits together, whether it works or not. So that'll be our next episode, and you can find me as a guest over on Once Over with Kaylee. We've had Kaylee on our show, but I discussed Train Spotting with her over on Once Over with Kaylee. And it's a film that is near and dear to my heart, because Mark, I try to convince people that it's actually a really funny movie. There are two very disturbing visuals in the movie. Yes, I understand, but it's actually a really funny movie about friendship and, yes, screwing your friends over. So yes, we talk about that.
I was just in Edinburgh in January, so I was, right where the Irving Welsh country, Welsh country, and that one's. In fact, when Train Spotting 2 came out, I think you and I did a Bladtcast together.
I was going to say, you and I talked about Train Spotting 2, and I rewatched it, even though the episode of Kaylee's show that I did, we didn't talk about Train Spotting 2, but I felt like I kind of want to refresh my memory on that. And I liked it when I saw it, and I liked it even more this time. And there's some great bonus features on the Train Spotting 2 Blu-ray that were able to give me some insight for the original, including that the one producer really did not want Ewan McGregor to be in the movie. He didn't want to give him the script to read. So, but Danny Boyle felt differently. And I know we've talked about it. I also love Danny Boyle's first film, Shallow Grave. That's a phenomenal movie. Also with Ewan McGregor, and it actually says in the credits introducing Ewan McGregor. Christopher Eccleston's in it. So I've tried to sell that movie to nerds by saying this movie has Obi-Wan Kenobi and the Doctor in it. How could you not watch it? But anyway, so we'll be talking Caligula next week. And have you ever seen that film, Mark?
A long time ago. I think Helen Mirren's in that one too.
She is, yeah. She had no idea she was going to be in a glorified porn. Yeah,
that was a long time ago. I've seen that. I have vague memories.
Well, join us for that next week. As always, you can follow me at Christian DMZ on Twitter and Instagram. There are accounts for the Bladtcast. I'm getting tagged in those accounts more often. And then I have to say to people, well, the Christian DMZ has a lot more followers. I don't know, but please like and subscribe. If you have liked this, please subscribe to the channel. I'm embarrassed that I've had this channel for as long as I have, and I have the number of followers that I do. But the people who do follow are very loyal, jumping into the chat. Thank you to Craig Robinson, Cut of the Jib, Sam Whitfield, and Flat Cat Jessica, who said hello at the beginning of the show, and reminding me that I had some production that I intended to do before this episode. But, and of course, I should always let everybody know the show that I do on the Who Are These Podcasts YouTube channel. Who Are These Broadcasters is Tuesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific, every single Tuesday. And by the way, Craig gives us a nice LLAP, little live long and prosper. Thank you, Craig. And I have been doing our show, Marvel Movie Talk. We've been sort of an after show for X-Men 97, the animated series, which has been phenomenal. So you can check all that stuff out. It's a lot of plugs, but I do a lot of things. And if people enjoy them, it feels a little bit more worthwhile. But even if they don't, it's still fun to get to do silly stuff like this. That is all the time we have for now. We will talk Caligula next time on the Bladtcast.